Now, despite Adrian's global footprint, Singapore and Japan, etc., I would say his heart is very much local, given that his father is Malaysian. So he also disarmingly describes himself as a mad scientist. So hopefully if our reverse brain drain works, he could be our mad scientist. And you'll see after this presentation why that will be very good for us. Now, let me introduce the topic that he's going to talk about. Deep breath, synthetic reality, the science and applications of virtual and mixed realities. Now, I had the fortune to see Dr. Adrian talk at one of our internal knowledge events at Khazanah. And I think the most important thing I took away from that was this session will give you a glimpse of the future, a sense of the future. And what better way to end the first day of the Khazanah Megatrends Forum with a sense of the future. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm welcome again to Dr. Adrian Cheok.
And yes, it is true. My father is actually born in Kuala Lumpur, so I am actually originally have Malaysian blood. And also I feel very nervous today because actually my uncle is here, Albert Cheok. Actually happens to be my father's twin brother. He was... It's the first time I've given a talk with some family member involved, so I'm very nervous. But anyway, my uncle Albert Cheok was chairman of the Bangkok Bank. But somehow I was the odd, maybe the black sheep of the family, and going into really crazy science and all this kind of stuff. So I will talk about some weird things that I've been doing together with not just me, but also I've got a lot of PhD students over the years who, luckily, I found are as mad as me. So it's, and I hope if any of you have kids around teenagers or going to university, please send them to my lab so we can do more crazy things. But I'm going to talk about how, in the future, the virtual world and the real world is going to merge together into one. There's a kind of new kind of reality, a synthetic reality. At first, I'm going to just give a little bit of a history about what we've been doing in our lab. I started a few years ago thinking about children were playing a lot of computer games, at home, sitting in front of the TV. Parents would say, go and play outside in the garden. So, and even now we have things like the Nintendo Wii and these kind of games where you move a bit of your body. But basically, you're standing in your lounge and staring at a screen. So I thought, could we combine the traditional play, physical activity, together with computer games and take the computer games out into the physical world? Then we can have the best of both worlds. People can move their body, socialize in the physical world, as well as enjoy a kind of fantasy computer entertainment. So in this case here, it was a system called Human Pac-Man, which I developed nearly 10 years ago now. And the basic idea was that you can see that on the left side, there's some of my students, and they're wearing a wearable computer and head-mount display, and they actually become the Pac-Man character. When I was a kid, I used to love Pac-Man, so I decided to choose Pac-Man as the kind of test. But when you move your body in the physical world, like, you're a Pac-Man or a Pac-Woman, you have to walk your body and collect the cookie. You see the cookie as if it's there in augmented reality. And you walk through and eat it, as you can see in the picture there. And at the same time, your body is being tracked, so your character will move in the virtual world. So basically, your body and the game character become one. I'll show you a quick video of this being demoed. A wearable computer with a head-mounted display and various sensors which is sensing my body's position and as well as the head orientation. So we know exactly where I am and what I'm looking at. So when we do this, we can then augment the real world, which I'm in now, with the virtual world. So this Pac-Man world, I'm seeing it as part of the real world. I can see cookies in front of me, and I'm walking through them as if I'm the human Pac-Man. So what we're aiming for is that we're taking the human Pac-Man and bringing it into more mobile devices. Within 2 years, we'll be able to see full commercial human Pac-Man type games on the mobile phones.
So, is the time right for a human Pac-Man?
Okay, so that was filmed a few years ago, and you can see I had a lot of crazy equipment, and it wasn't exactly wearable, it was about 3 or 4 kilos, but that's what researchers do. But now, that can really be run on an iPhone or a smartphone. And already you're seeing now commercial augmented reality games coming out into the marketplace. So just last 2 weeks ago, I was in Tianjin, and I was on a panel and speaking with a guy who founded a company called Leia. And you might, if you bought a phone recently, you might have Leia already installed. And basically, he told me the main market he sees for this is the content. So, for example, these kind of games can now be played on mobile phones. So we've gone like this, crazy equipment and huge equipment to, being able to do it on your phone. Now, also, this kind of mixed realities allows also new kinds of interaction, not just with humans, but also with animals, even with different species. So, for example, you might have a pet cat or a pet dog, and, how do you play with your pet dog? You just kind of throw a stick at, and kind of very simple. But you can't do that also if you're not at home. But with this kind of virtual world and real world, you can play a game together with your pets, even if you're not in the home. And so this system here that we developed is called Metazoa ludens. And basically, it's a game in the real world. The hamster is chasing a bait. And it's actually like a robotic arm with a bait. Actually, it's a tunnel, because hamsters love to run into tunnels. But then that corresponds in the virtual world to a giant hamster chasing you, the human. So it's like a kind of game of cat and mouse, except now you become the mouse. And so you can have a new kind of relation, because in the real world the hamster couldn't chase you because it's too small. But you can have new kind of interesting interaction. And after I developed this, I started to think about what other ways could we interact with our pets at home. And I thought, well, you cannot talk to animals. So if we're out the house and we're missing our pet cat, we can't talk to the cat because they don't understand our language yet. Although I hope one day we can talk to animals. So I decided to think, but one thing we can is we can hug, because normally when you go home you'll hug your cat or dog, sitting in front of the TV. I thought one thing that we can hug our pets through the internet. So imagine you're at work and you're missing your pet. In this case, I chose chicken. And I put this especially for Afzal, the next video, because he kept mentioning about the chicken. But there's two reasons I chose chicken, actually. One is that, in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, and Southeast Asian countries, a lot of children play with chickens in the villages, in the kampong. And actually, I was actually very pleased. I went to the Shanghai Expo a couple of weeks ago, and in the Singapore pavilion, all right, which was quite boring, I must admit, compared to the Malaysian one. But anyway, there's this huge video with Lee Kuan Yew, great guy. But he said that when they first built the HDB houses in Singapore, people would take their chickens there. And I thought, that's great. So this really shows that the chicken is the real pet in Southeast Asia. Right? Okay, but the second reason is a scientific reason. I started to do some research, and believe it or not, there's actually journals, academic journals called poultry research. Right? They're really, really interesting for bedtime reading. But the poultry have a very strong affinity to touch. So it's a very good animal for testing this pet hugging system. Now I'll show you the video, especially dedicated to Afzal.
Poultry Internet, a remote interactive system specially designed for humans and their poultry friends. Poultry Internet comprises an office system where the human plays with the physical avatar of the poultry pet, and a backyard system in which the poultry pet lives. Both systems are interconnected by motion internet media and touch internet media. The poultry in this project is a chicken. The door avatar of the chicken is mounted on a moving mechanism. This is the inside body of the door, and we put embedded devices inside it. They consist of touch sensors and a radio frequency transmitter. This is a specially designed pet jacket which consists of vibrators and receivers. The vibrators are activated when the human touches the sensors. We put the jacket onto a fluffy chicken doll. This is a demonstration showing how the touch sensors and vibrators work. Each sensor corresponds to a vibrator and a light-emitting diode. To demonstrate the tracking of the chicken and movement of the doll, again we use the fluffy chicken to represent the real chicken. We can see that the doll follows the chicken's movement quite closely. We can see how the chicken responds while the people at the office touch the doll. In order to test the chicken's motivation for pleasure, we conducted a scientific test called the red door and the blue door test. We put the chicken in a common area where it is free to choose between the two similar cages, one with a blue door and the other with a red door. If the chicken goes into the blue door, we will put on the pet jacket and remotely touch it through the door interface. The chicken will experience the vibrating sensation resulting from the touch. On the other hand, if the chicken goes into the cage with the red door, we will not do anything to it. Over a period of time, we found that the chicken will actually choose to go into the blue door most of the time. The test shows that the chicken responds positively to being remotely touched.
Okay, so there's now obviously the next stage of this is human-to-human touch communication, because imagine you're on a business trip, like for example, going off for some work, and you're missing your kids, and maybe you can call them and you can say good night, but wouldn't it be good to hug them at the same time? So now we've developed a system which is a kind of hugging suit for parents and children, and the parents can hug a doll when they're at work, the father or mother, and the children can then feel the hugging on the same place on their body. We have very accurate touch sensor which can recognize where do you touch the doll. So in this way here, parents and children can be connected by hugging even through the internet, because touch is a very important part of the parent and child communication. Okay, so that's the kind of history of what we've been working on in our lab in the past few years. And now I want to just talk a little bit about some of the motivation and thoughts that I'm having for the next stage of our research, where we should look into the future. I think one thing which we have seen is there's been a real revolutionary change in society the past few years due to the connectivity, basically by internet, mobile phone, text messaging. Basically, we are connected all the time with each other constantly. In some way, we are going back to the traditional society. So, modern society needed to have kind of structure and linearity and hierarchy. But in the ancient society, we lived in small groups, and we knew every individual was connected to each other all the time. We knew what everyone was doing all the time. So if you look at the ancient Athenians, that was the kind of society they had, and that's what the kind of society that we are moving into now. Now, of course, there can be positive and negative possibilities that will happen due to this big change in our society, always being connected all the time. One is that perhaps the individual identity and self-consciousness maybe will become less. Maybe we'll lose the sparks of individual creativity. For example, maybe there'll be less Leonardo da Vinci's in this world, maybe less Einstein's in this world. But on the positive perspective, perhaps we're developing a new kind of wired consciousness. And this is a new kind of social consciousness, and this may be even better than the previous consciousness that we had. For example, if you think about Wikipedia. Wikipedia, I think at the last count, had about nearly 3.5 million pages. If one person wrote that, it's impossible, because you couldn't write 3.5 million pages before you died, before you're dead already. All right? But in just a very short time, Wikipedia could develop from this new kind of wired creative consciousness. And as I briefly mentioned previously, this is also leading to very radical change in the internet generation, those who are about 10 and below. There's, I think I mentioned before, Professor Wim Veen. He wrote a book called Homo Sapien. Sapien, like, zapping your television remote control, etc. And there's some growing evidence that the young children actually are developing different brains from all previous human beings, because of the fact that from day zero they're constantly connected, they're constantly communicating, they've basically unlimited visual media, and they have a real ability to multitask. This is something which is adults think that we can multitask, but actually most psychologists have found that our efficiency goes down quite a lot if you try to do more than one task at once. Whereas now the tests are showing children can hold maybe 5 or 6 operations in their frontal lobe at the same time. Now, I won't repeat so much the previous thing I mentioned in the last talk, but basically, children are experiencing interactivity from day zero. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I recently bought a kind of smartphone from Samsung, and I was so surprised that she didn't need any instruction. She could just use it straight away. And so somehow everything is interactive from their point of view. And so this is one thing we have to think about when we're thinking about the future of the next development of combining real and virtual world. Another thing is the iconic skills. Young people are having found that much stronger sense of iconic skills than previously. So when adults read web pages, they kind of read it like the way they read text in a book. But children and young people are not like that. They basically they're looking at, they're jumping all over the place and also recognizing icons very rapidly. And also I mentioned about multitasking, and this is becoming a reality. So I'm sure there's a lot of parents here, and maybe some parents might get think their children are not doing their homework well enough because they got the video going and radio, they're doing internet chat. But this is the new reality that because of the constant connectivity, that is how they want to learn. Those days when I was a child, my mother could literally say, "Go to your bedroom and do your homework," and there's no telephone and no TV. But this can't happen anymore. But instead, children are learning new skills. So this is an example. Children watching television. So sometimes parents get very frustrated, changing the channel. But it's been found that the young people can process discontinuous information and extract the important data because they're recognizing cues. For example, they could be watching, CNN news and some game show and sports all at the same time, and they know when to switch. And they're very good at processing discontinuous information. This is very similar to, you can see, to the kind of hyperlinks we see on internet. Also very non-linear. So children, the young people probably less and less enjoy to read traditional linear books. They're much more thinking about non-linear and jumping different aspects from one to the other. So this is educational materials will probably have to change. So for example, instead of, you saw before about the human Pac-Man, the augmented reality. So instead of giving the child a book about, say, ancient Rome, they can experience ancient Rome, say, in mixed reality or, much more interactively. So I think this is very important. This is one very big motivation now for our lab, is to look at how can we create the media for the digital kids they are making their own world for their own future. So this kind of things that we don't teach them at school, multitasking, scanning, etc., they're learning it by themselves. But obviously we should fine-tune our education with new media so that they can be optimized for the future. Because whether we like it or not, it's already happened. But of course there's some negative aspects. And, I read this book last year. It's by Neil Postman. I highly recommend it. It's called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And he actually wrote this in the 80s, before internet and before Twitter. So probably he would turn in his grave if he, maybe he's still alive. Anyway, but anyway, if he knew about Twitter, he'd be horrified. But basically, the main thesis of the book is that in the textual age, it actually very much affected our culture. So as Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is is the message. So when we primarily got information by text, we also had main cultural discourse in that kind of linear, deep argument. And so, for example, a long time ago in America, they would have, town hall meetings with the politicians, and they'd get up, almost like Cambridge, Oxford speech and give a debate, real debate. But now, once television came about, if you want to hold a person's attention on television, you need to entertain. And so this radically affected our culture, which is why now politicians should do 30-second soundbite to be as entertaining as possible. So what Neil Postman said is that we've gone from the age of what he calls exposition. Maybe New York was the kind of cultural capital of America before, in the text age. And now and in the 80s, Las Vegas becomes kind of the cultural capital of America. And also, you might have read about Aldous Huxley. George Orwell wrote a book, 1984, which I read in high school, and he thought the future was going to be like oppressive governments, and that people will not think for themselves because of oppressive governments. But basically, apart from North Korea, I think there's no other place like that. So, but Aldous Huxley actually maybe made a more interesting prediction. He predicted that we, similar to what Postman said, we amuse ourselves to death. So we go into trivia, tweeting away, watching, basically not very intelligent television, and all these other kind of things. So there is some negative in the age of entertainment that we are in. Also, I want to just briefly mention that Neil Postman talked about the age of entertainment, but now we have a kind of combination of the age of entertainment and the age of connectivity. So last week someone said to me that the new wealth is publicity, right? So, and the new poverty is an anonymity. So if 1 million people watch your video on YouTube, that's worth a lot. And we were just talking about Twitter. And so I think Twitter basically currently doesn't have any real revenue model, but it must be worth a lot because there's hundreds of millions of users on Twitter. So this is a kind of combination. So now the ultimate for a lot of people, if you can be on Oprah Winfrey, it's like the ultimate. But if not, you want thousands of people to read your tweets. This goes on to the fact that we've kind of reached the end of solitude. So there was a study done by Nielsen, which may be a little bit even out of date now, that the average teenager sends 4,000 text messages a month. And if you calculate that, that's about every 5 minutes when they're not sleeping. Right? So basically, people are not alone ever anymore. And how is this going to affect society? Well, that's one thing we have to think deeply about. But even in brain science is now changing, neuroscientists. So in the 70s and 80s, neuroscientists had a model of the brain, which was that we are kind of like a computer. Yeah, but then they realized actually our brain, and then there was a kind of whole field of artificial intelligence, and to try to, make it, but they could never do it. And the reason is because our brain, now it's been realized our brain is not really a computer. It's a kind of, computing machine. But now neuroscientists are realizing that our brains are very much networked. So the decisions that we make is based on our social surroundings. And our whole personality from the start is based on social context. So now the current brain science and psychological model is more about networked or social mind. So you can see that, we're seeing big changes even in science from the network effect. Okay, so now how does this lead on to the kind of research that we should look at into the future? Well, I think that because of the total connectivity and because we are getting to the global connectedness, we have to think about the next stage of communication by internet. And now we're kind of in the stage of information communication, where basically you can communicate any information you want. Text, video, audio. It's all available, and it's very easy to access. But the next stage would be about total experience, so that wherever you are, if you want to, you can share your experience with your family, with your friends. So I'll show you some of the examples of the works that we're currently working on in a lab. This is some small robots made for children, because now younger and younger children are connecting by social networks, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But maybe some parents can often feel very worried. For example, if you're, a 10-year-old daughter making a friend online, you don't really know the identity of the other person. Maybe it's some, bad person. But in this case here, we combine the physical world with the virtual world. So the children should make friends using their robots. So they touch the robots together, and then they can become friends in the social network in the virtual world. At the same time, the parents will get a message on their phone whenever their children make friends. And this way, you can combine real and virtual world and have a comfortable experience for parents, and it's fun for children as well. They can also do things like squeeze the robot, send a hug, this kind of thing. Last year, NEC, which is, you probably know, is a big multinational electronics company, they came to me and said, we want to do a project. I don't know why they wanted to give me money, but anyway, they said, we want to do a project where you can look at the aspect of elderly people. And especially in Japan, there's a lot of single person family. So, for example, elderly grandfather or grandmother living alone. And this is not just in Japan. You know, even starting to see this in Europe. You know, and I read a statistic that in UK, 20% of pensioners didn't speak to another human being for a whole week, you know, during the week of that survey. And then this actually leads to mental and physical depression. So I was thinking, how could we address this problem? And I was thinking of in traditional family life, especially in Asian culture, we would maybe live together, the grandparents, the parents, and the grandchildren, and have a family meal together. And the meal and the family was a kind of hub for the family communication. But I think most people here probably less and less experiencing that kind of family communication around the meal. So, and also, if you're not in the same city, how do you do that? So can we make new kinds of media where people can communicate in a similar way over the internet? For example, cooking together, dining together, and making new kinds of family bonding through the internet. So for example, maybe the grandmother's in Kuala Lumpur and the granddaughter's in Sydney studying, but they can cook together and have a, you know, experience communication. Here's some prototype of a cooking equipment we're making where it can measure color, temperature, texture, and other parameters so that you can interactively cook with another family member. And also we're working on devices that can print food. So, for example, many people will think, okay, their grandmother makes particularly special dish, okay? But, you know, if you're away from your grandmother, how can you experience that? Well, your grandmother, working on devices that your grandmother could send you the food through a 3D food printing machine. And not just that, it could be the opposite. For example, maybe the grandmother's feeling sick, and the granddaughter can send a message, go online, make a message, and then when grandma opens up the rice cooker, there's a message printed on the rice, right? So you see, the thing is that this makes new kinds of communication with different experience, all the senses, taste and smell. Here's some prototypes we made in the lab, and I'm going to show you a quick video of this now.
New communication technologies have made it easier to stay in contact with people. Yet because of this massive amount of information, younger generations have shorter attention spans and spend less time on meaningful communication with family and friends. With a rising elderly population, the problem of loneliness is a growing concern. Therefore, we introduce food media, an integrated system based around the common bonds between all generations, food and eating. The system consists of 3 components, each promoting a critical form of communication. First, a co-cooking pot and spoon, which encourages collaboration. Second, a rice printer that creates the link between today's social networking platforms and traditional physical communication. And third, a 3D food printer that transforms eating into an interactive, emotionally rich communication experience. Through the co-cooking system, people can prepare meals together at remote locations. The lid can sense the food temperature, density, and color, communicating these measurements to remote locations through a web interface. The spatula can sense the stirring angle and speed using accelerometers and gyroscopes. This movement can be replicated in a remote location, providing the user with haptic feedback. The haptic forces are generated using rotational motors in the spatula, producing a physical connection between users, reinforcing a sense of physical presence. The system stresses the importance of an active learning. It also simulates our childhood memory of grandma holding your hand as you learn to cook for the first time. The rice printer bridges the intergenerational gap by allowing anyone to send a digital message through a variety of popular social platforms, which the elderly can then receive through a physical and intuitive medium. Rice is used because it is one of the most common, convenient, and affordable foods in many Asian countries. The rice printer interfaces with social networking sites and telecommunication tools. It retrieves text messages and converts them into image format. The printer head is controlled by a robotic arm with 2 degrees of freedom. Printing is carried out by the open and close of the nozzle valve. The rice printer brings generations closer together. The 3D food printer creates edible messages that change as a person eats, allowing the sender to creatively incorporate their surroundings from the weather, mood, and special occasions. The system produces 3D food by printing from bottom to top layers of 1mm cubed agar pixels. A nozzle containing flavored agar employs silicone heaters to maintain the temperature for ideal viscosity. To print, the air pump on the nozzle is activated. The printed unit solidifies rapidly upon contact with the cool environment and binds to the next unit and the layer above. The system receives the layered information from the user in drawings or text. The robotic arm with 3 degrees of freedom moves the nozzle to position according to coordinates and builds the 3D structure layer by layer. Through this system, we aim to create a new form of paperless and biodegradable narrative. Our food media system aims to explore the potential for unique communicative experiences.
Okay, so you can see it's still at the early stages. This is kind of like rough off really happening research in my lab, but you can see now we can start to do even printing of actually we took a lot of influence from the Malaysian sweets for this version, so we can kind of already print Malaysian sweets. Now I mentioned before about experience communication and total connectivity. I think one thing that will happen is it's not just going to be connectivity on computers or mobile phones. Everything will be connected to the internet soon. So whether it's your jacket, the carpet on the floor, the curtains, everything, the chair is going to be connected to the internet. So we've been looking at how can we create new communication through fabric. And of course, one way you can do it is by putting lights or something in your the fabric, but that's not very natural. And unless you're like kind of a disco or something, it's not very appealing. So, but with this system we've developed that can change color without emitting light, and that way you can imagine in the future you can make new kinds of communication display. And for the for one of the versions we just developed, which we just showed in Ars Electronica, which is a kind of media arts festival in Austria, it was based on the traditional silk screen that you see in the Asian culture. So you can have a look at this video here. So it uses Peltier semiconductors to change the temperature and color of the fabric. So in Malaysia, you have a lot of very beautiful traditional fabric, like for example the batik. So you can imagine that working together with traditional designers, they could animate their designs, but in a very culturally relevant form. So not by putting LED and emitting lights, but still staying true to the original cultural intention. So that's why I think there's a lot of opportunity in the future to combine traditional culture with digital culture to make a new kind of cultural computing. And finally, I just want to end with the work that we're looking. I mentioned a little bit about the food and cooking communication, but the final kind of frontier for internet communication will be smell and taste. Currently, we can really communicate by audio and visual. I mentioned touch. If we communicate by smell and taste, then we can have a much more richer experience communication. Smell and taste is very important. It brings emotions. Often you have personal memories from a particular smell, even cultural influence. A lot of the different cultures have particular smell or scent, and this is very important to communicate culture. Right now, the communication technology for smell and taste is a little bit like the analog days of music, right? It's basically need chemicals. And of course, you cannot transmit chemicals through the internet. So what can we do? We want to be able to make remote taste and smell communication and make it digital and electric. So for example, if you're in Paris and you're enjoying a fine glass of wine, right now you can take a photo of the wine, you can try to write about it, like it's got a scent of blueberry and I don't know what, but actually it's very difficult to really describe taste by any means except by tasting it. So you can imagine if instead you have like some kind of taste sensor on your mobile phone and you can send it to your, maybe the wife in Paris can send the taste of wine or cheese or something to the husband in Kuala Lumpur. So working on tongue electrical actuation, and basically the idea is that to put a device on your tongue, kind of like an electric lollipop, and so maybe you get a call from your wife or husband, and then say put it on your mouth, and then it'll stimulate your tongue electrically to produce digital taste. And currently in my lab, you can see my students put me there to test their system, and I didn't die of electric shock. Now we can currently generate bitter, salty, sweet, and so we're working on making a robust version of this system. In the future work, we're thinking of how can we transmit smell. Smell is much more difficult. I do not have much knowledge of medical science, but after some slight investigation, I realized the smell sensors are actually are behind our nose. They're not in our nose. So to stimulate them directly, you'd have to stick something very deeply up your nasal canal, which would be very uncomfortable. So what we're thinking of is actually working with a professor in the medical school. He's actually a professor of anatomy, and we're measuring the brain response when people eat certain foods. So, for example, eating chocolate. So we had the chocolate person still here. No, I'm not. Anyway. So imagine you're eating the Godiva chocolate, and you're sensing your brain, and then we will put some magnetic coils on your head and use pulsed magnetic fields to stimulate the same neurons and reproducing that taste. So if this works out, then you could send any kind of smell over the internet. And finally, I just want to end this talk by saying I think that the 21st century has some advantage, because we're in this new connected society, has some advantage for the Asian in Asia. Not only, I think, is Asia East becoming the economic kind of center in 21st century, but also kind of cultural center. If you think about traditional Western culture, individualism was most important. But in the Asian culture, maybe group and cooperation, togetherness was most important. And now we're seeing with the internet, everyone around the world is becoming like this, constantly connected all the time. So I think this gives some very strong motivation for countries such as Malaysia, truly Asia, right? So that to really take initiative, because now we're a network society, and that is a kind of Asian society, and we can take initiative for the new kind of R&D in the 21st century. Okay, thank you very much.
Adrian, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got about 10 minutes for questions. I think you'll agree with me, Adrian covered a wide range of things, and I'm sure you've got lots of questions, as I did the first time I saw this. So please, put up your hands, please. We'd like to take maybe 3 questions. Please, sir. The mic's right there.
I'm the dismal scientist, but actually I think that was one of the most depressing presentations I've ever heard, not your delivery. If I was a sexual predator or a crook of any ilk, I think this is a wonderful opportunity. And I think you rather glossed over the security issues here. There's no way that parents are going to be as au fait at keeping the security up to date as their kids' ability to get around it. So when you're doing this sort of research, do you think about the very negative externalities that can come out of this? because it scares me rotten. Stuxnet's, which we've just seen in terms of shutting down industrial systems. That's a scary vision of the future as far as I can see.
Can you repeat shutting down which system? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Stuxnet, the virus that's just shut down the uranium reactor or caused major damage.
Yes. Of course, what I showed you is prototypes in the laboratory. So for these to become real products, we have to think very carefully about such aspects such as security. So an example is the small robot which I showed, the Petit Marot for children. So we've been developing that in the lab the past couple of years, and just recently we, just recently some venture capitalists in Singapore, said, I want to fund this project. And so then it goes to the second stage where they, form a company and commercialize the product. And so at that stage, yes, you, of course, have to think very, very carefully about, the security protocols, how would you make a real product for this. But from the research level, I think the most important thing is, which I always encourage my PhD students, make quantum step innovation. And often it is going to be things which will be very controversial because, if you want to invent the future, it's going to be something that has not been, thought about very carefully before because it should be totally new. So because I myself and also I push my, masters and PhD students to make very quantum leap research, then there's a lot of those holes, like you said. I mean, what I showed you is from the lab. It's not really a real product. Although we've had a few startup companies from our lab. From the negative point of view, for example, the Huggy Pajama. Sometimes I'll get some question: wouldn't this encourage the parents to stay at work longer? Because they can just hug their children through the internet instead of going home and really hugging their children. So these systems should never be really used to replace the real physical world interaction. But there's often times when you really are not together. Like when you're at work, we're all here now in this conference, and we're not with our children or with our loved ones. And so I think whatever media gets developed, there will be negative output. So yes, I'm sure there'll be parents who, set up something. Okay, every 1 hour, this will automatically hug my kid, or the kid thinks I'm missing them, but it's just done automatically. But on the other hand, I received a few emails, and two of them stick in my mind. One was a man who's in UK, and he said, "Can I buy one of your Huggy pajamas? Because my daughter is in the ICU, intensive care unit in the hospital, and I can see her through the glass, but I can't go inside to hug her. So I want to buy the system to hug." And I felt really sorry for him. I said, "But it's not commercial product yet." But I felt very sorry about that. And then I received an email from a very young girl. I don't know how old, but she sounded like about 10 years old or something. She said, "I want to. Can we buy your system because my father is in jail, and I want to hug my father because he's in jail." And I also felt, So I think what they're saying is, whatever, as inventors, we can invent media, and there will be heartwarming uses, and there will be negative uses. So I think when the things really go out the lab, it becomes not just the role of academics like me, because I think we're not suitable to take the lead for those factors. But you need government, you need good policy, and also social standards.
Any more questions? Adrian, maybe one question just on the point that you made just now. In terms of your motivation, in terms of the research that you're doing, what actually drives you? I mean, clearly making something commercial that's helpful for society is something, but what drives you? And if you had a magic wand for commercializing and making all these things happen, what would those things be?
I think probably I'm kind of almost middle age. I'm 39 soon, and so probably my motivation changing over time. I think when I first started this, my motivation was, I mean, when we were young, we watched Star Wars. I think every person who's in their late 30s and kind of geeky like me, they saw Star Wars. Okay, that I want to make that in reality, right? So that's a kind of augmented reality. Princess Leia appearing as a hologram, and I think that was the kind of a real original motivation. How can we invent the future of communication? But now I myself personally, and this kind of relates to the previous session, I'm really thinking that there's a bigger picture about this, as in creativity itself is important, and it's for the next stage of society, for the next stage of economy, the idea and creativity becomes so important. So now I think the next stage for my lab and also for my students is not just coming up with cool gadgets and cool inventions, but making toolkits so that the next generation, so kids, even kids who are in the rural community or in the developing world, could become the next inventor. So now at a kind of meta level, how can we become creative? How can we become inventive? I think that's kind of new motivation for me and what I'm trying to encourage for my students.
Okay, last chance for a question for Adrian. Yes, lady at the back.
I found your presentation extremely interesting. You are promoting creativity from a lab perspective. There must be a way of moving creativity from the lab to the institutions, to the real world, because if it stays there, it will never move. So what's your view? How do you manage to transition that creativity from just the concept to the application?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It kind of relates to what I was thinking of. I think at a kind of meta level, now what I'm thinking of, and also trying to develop together with my students, is how do we generate such inventions, and trying to encapsulate this in terms of toolkits. Now the technology is so cheap. Not just software is basically free. Anything which is digital bits is can be transported for free. Even hardware now is so cheap. You can make, you can provide toolkits, for example, that people can make almost anything with hardware toolkits. And this is in combination also with design. Just like with the Apple, your Apple was. There's, as you probably know, the company in Singapore called Creative. I hope no one from Creative is here. But I personally know Sim Wong, who's the kind of founder of Creative, and he did a fantastic job in the 80s and made sound cards. You stick it in your computer and make sound. But then they made MP3 player, but they had the best MP3 player. They were before Apple. But why did Apple win that game? Basically Creative. Nobody wants a Creative MP3 player, and the reason is because Apple realized that now what's more important is the lifestyle product, and lifestyle involves technology and design and overall creativity. That's why it's so critical to teach this to the next generation. And already, for example, in Malaysia, there's a multimedia campus in the Cyberjaya. So I think there is more and more places which are thinking more about, okay, we're not just going to teach computer science, but we're going to teach computer science plus design, plus some, little bit of art or something, right? I think it has to be a combination, but, thinking as a designer is very important for the next stage, and I think this is where a lot of the cultural traditions that are here in Malaysia, for example, beautiful traditions of the art, the clothes and music, etc. This is real creativity, and probably we should be teaching this more and teaching more technology. You put those two together, you can then generate the next generation of exciting products. So I think that's what really is important is to think very carefully about not just teaching one track, but getting the young people and even adults, because adults should retrain themselves to think in multiple ways as a designer, as a technologist, right? And we can also provide this to the children. For example, in India, you probably know I think they recently released a $30, I can see iPad there, $30 tablet, PC, right? So this is $30 US, and maybe next year it's going to be $10, right? And soon it's going to get to the point where, $10, $20, you can provide all these toolkits to the kids and let them be creative.
Okay, it's 5:30. I think with that, it just leaves me to say thank you, Adrian. I think your uncle will be proud of you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'll hand over to...
Thank you very much. Well, poultry research, but definitely not poultry. The mind boggles where we can go in terms of communicating and bonding on a different level. You certainly sparked off a lot of interest in the room, Dr. Cheok, especially among the men for some reason when you mentioned your electronic lollipop. But I digress. We'd now like to invite Puan Shahnaz Al-Sadat, Executive Director, Strategic Human Capital Management, Khazanah National Berhad, to present a token of appreciation to Dr. Cheok. Dipersilakan. Thank you, Puan Shahnaz, Doctor, and of course, Jiv. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of day one of the Khazanah Megatrends Forum. Don't forget, you're here as delegates, but we'd like you to be a bit more proactive. Do visit our booths, the Sejahtera Teach for Malaysia and Pinta booths, and find out how you can be a part of the whole effort to alleviate poverty and to advance education. Inshallah, we'll see you again here tomorrow. Have a pleasant evening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.